welcome to Hope Source's Stress Management Workshop from our Hope University department. We've developed this workshop based on recent research on stress and hope you can find a few strategies that you find helpful. Before we can talk about why stress is important, we need to understand what it is. Now take a minute to consider, what does stress mean to you? There are a few definitions of the word stress, but they all generally boil down to two types of feelings, a feeling of pressure and a feeling of anxiety. I'd like to use an analogy to our experience of stress. Imagine that I'm holding a half-full glass of water at arm's length, and if I do this for 5 minutes, what will happen to my arm? It may be a little tired, but it will recover fairly quickly. What if I held it for an hour? My arm would probably be aching. If I held it for an entire day, my arm would feel numb and paralyzed. No matter the time frame, the weight never changes. However, the longer I hold it, the heavier it begins to feel. So when we connect this to our definition, a feeling of pressure and anxiety, we can guess that my arm would begin to experience pressure over time if it was forced to keep holding a glass of water. If we went one step further and added more water to my glass, my arm would tire much more quickly. Similarly, the stresses we experience day to day are like that glass of water. If we experience them for a little while, we could be just fine. Yet if we experience them more often, they begin to hurt. And if we experience them for a prolonged period of time, we can feel paralyzed, unable to do the things we want to. In the same way, if we experience multiple sources of stress at once, our strength saps quickly. Now, not all stress is bad. Low amounts of stress can prompt us to act quickly when we need to and help keep us motivated to complete projects, finish chores, etc. For example, if you have a task at work that has a short deadline, you may experience some stress, which motivates you to work quickly and complete the task on time. However, when we experience too much stress, it takes a toll on us. It exhausts us with anxiety and worry and frustrates us when we feel out of control. For example, a single parent who has young children and a full-time job already has enough on his plate. But say his father became ill and needs to be taken care of as well. This extra responsibility could become a stressor that exhausts his energy and could affect his physical health. And consider this. Research has shown that a significant increase in stress can lead to heart disease, chest pain, asthma, hypertension, and persistent headaches. Those are serious effects for such a common experience. But what does it tell us? It tells us that if we don't learn to manage our reactions to stress, we could face some serious consequences. This is why we're in this room today. I think we can all agree that stress affects us all. We all experience, at one time or another, some kind of buildup or situation that we may not know how to deal with. And when we're stressed, we become so absorbed in whatever situation is causing our distress that focusing is difficult, and we struggle to be productive. It's hard to get our projects done at work, to do chores at home, and to fulfill other life goals we set for ourselves. Stress also sucks our enjoyment of life right out of us. We can't relax, we can't connect well with others, it affects our quality of life. Because stress affects us in these ways, it's vital for our health, for our jobs, and for our families that we learn how to deal with stress. Some of us may know some ways to cope with stress, but not all of us were taught healthy ways to manage stress well. That is what we're focusing on today. In order to manage stress effectively, we need to learn how to recognize the source of our stress, change our reactions to stress, prepare ourselves to handle our stress, and finally avoid unnecessary stress. Following these steps helps us become more aware of ourselves and our reactions to stress and prepares us to act. Our first step in managing our stress is to recognize the source. We all feel stressed by different things, people, events, and situations, and it is important to note that a situation is only as stressful as we perceive it to be. This means that what is stressful for one person may not be stressful to another. There are countless outside factors that influence how stressful a situation appears to us. We all live and work in different environments and have different kinds and levels of stress that we can handle based on our own experiences and personalities. So let's take a look at this list of stressors. As you read through these, you might find that several of them have caused you stress in the past, but some of them stick around more often. Go ahead and write down 3 stressors that cause you the most stress. Keep these in mind as we go through the rest of the workshop and look for ways to manage your own specific stressors. Some of the most common stressors we all experience fall within 3 categories: work, our relationships with family and friends, and our money. So what kinds of stress do we experience at our jobs? This could be burnout, high demands, difficult environment, difficulties in interpersonal relationships, harassment, physically strenuous tasks, a loss of a job, or a high or low work pace. Even the environment can attack us with noise, lack of privacy, or poor lighting, etc. Many of us also encounter stress within our family and other close relationships. This could be conflict in relationships of family members, romantic partners, or friends. It could be conflict stemming from or leading to economic stress. It could lead to divorce or be a result of changes in responsibilities or roles. It could be illness of a family member or friend. Much of our stress with others revolves around changes in roles, unresolved conflicts, and illness. Another uncomfortable place we find stress is in our finances. We may experience debt, inability to pay bills, experience job loss, or have low resources to meet our needs. Financial stress can be one of the most debilitating experiences because it is so essential to our survival and quality of life. Because of this, it can seem hopeless to overcome. So, now we know where our stress is coming from, but how does it affect us? Stress affects our most vital functions, which influences how we respond. We're going to talk about each of these influences and effective strategies we can use to fight stress. First, the effects of stress relate to our brain and body, how we're wired, and how our bodies respond to our environments. It also affects our mind, the things we think about, what, how often, whether positive or negative. Our emotions are affected too, how we express and manage our emotions, and this can affect how we interact with other people, how we respond emotionally to difficult events, and how we feel day to day. Finally, stress affects our behavior, what we do, how we act, and what activities we choose to engage in. As we can see, stress affects just about every aspect of our lives. So let's take a closer look at each of these areas. When we experience stress, our bodies can't hide it. We might get frequent headaches or feel hot and sweaty. Other people might feel difficulty in sleeping, whether they're sleeping more or can't sleep at all. Might feel your heart pounding, have difficulty breathing, an upset stomach, or an increase or decrease in appetite. Our bodies are full of different abilities that are all controlled by our brains, which are complicated collections of signals, hormones, and organs with different functions. What research has shown is that different parts of the brain are more or less the control centers for our intense emotions, like fear, anxiety, anger, panic, and stress. When our body becomes aware of some stressful thing, it tells the brain, "Hey, get on your guard." This releases hormones into our body and prepares us to handle a stressful situation. And as we said earlier, some stress is okay because it prepares us to act. But sometimes we have a hard time turning off our body's responses. This means we stay stressed, more hormones are released, and we feel even more stressed. And putting so much energy into our stress can really take a toll on us. Along with the other effects we listed, stress can ultimately lead to serious fatigue, leaving us with neither energy nor motivation to fulfill our responsibilities well, let alone relax. Our minds are victims too. Often when we're stressed, we start to think negative things like, "I'm never going to get all of this done," or "I can't do anything right." We might think, "I need to be the best parent," or "I'm never going to be able to pay off all of this debt." These aren't very positive thoughts, and with all these negative thoughts in our head, it's difficult to concentrate. When we're stressed, we tend to focus on our mistakes, and sometimes our negative thoughts predict our future. We may be so terrified of making a mistake, such as turning in a work project late, and spend so much time worrying about it that we end up doing that very thing. We may assume the worst about a situation, and these can easily turn into snowball-like thoughts. Just like rolling a snowball down a hill, this kind of thinking happens when we take a small, negative event and little by little think about how much worse it might become until we've imagined the worst outcome possible. For example, you interview for a job but are not hired for it. You might think to yourself, "Man, I didn't get this job. I must be a horrible interviewer. I'm never going to be hired anywhere I want to work, and I'm going to end up homeless." Now, how much progress can we make if we assume the worst for ourselves? Stress also preys on our emotions. We might feel angry, anxious, irritated, nervous, afraid, resentful or apathetic, lonely, confused, or cynical. We may recognize these emotions, but sometimes our emotions deceive us. We often feel these negative emotions during times of stress, but may not realize that they stem from the buildup of stress. In these situations, our emotions tend to have negative consequences on others around us and damage our relationships. We may recognize feelings of anxiety first, worrying about the future and not being able to relax. We may also be fearful. We may be afraid of failure, of letting someone down, of not living up to our own expectations or the expectations of others. Could be that we're afraid of losing status, worried about financial loss or loss of a relationship. Similarly, we could be angry for a variety of reasons, such as not having enough help from family members at home or at work. Again, we could be angry about loss of status, feeling angry about an unfair workload, fights with family or friends, or not getting an expected promotion, etc. Most of these stem from feeling like we haven't gotten something we deserve, or that we got something that we don't think we deserve. Finally, stress affects our behaviors, what we do. Whether consciously or unconsciously, most of us begin to avoid our stressors, such as ignoring someone we've had an argument with, or putting off a project that we know will take a lot of time or effort. However, the stressor is still there, and we still feel anxious about confronting the person or situation in the future. The buildup of stress can also overflow into other relationships and situations and cause us to take out our frustration on others. Stress affects our emotions, and our emotions affect how we treat others. Similarly, we may start to mistreat ourselves by neglecting the things that rejuvenate us, give us energy, and help us relax. Whether we give up exercise, healthy eating, healthy sleeping, or take time to relax, it takes a toll on us and makes it even more difficult to handle stress. And we all have our go-to habits that make us feel good and help us cope with stress. But sometimes we try to cope with unhealthy behaviors. They take up too much of our time, they waste our energy, and leave us unprepared to cope with stressful situations. Ultimately, they're temporary fixes. They relieve stress for a short time, but don't really help us in the long run. One study found that women are most likely to eat chocolate when they are feeling anxious or depressed, but the only reliable change in mood that they experienced from their drug of choice was an increase in guilt. The same is true for men, although they tend towards saltier foods like hamburgers. As we can see, one example could be poor eating habits. It feels comforting to eat a lot or to eat unhealthy food, but it doesn't give us lasting energy. Other temporary fixes could be alcohol, smoking, excessive time spent on video games, movie, or reading, which is usually 2 or more hours spent on any of those things. We could be prone to procrastinate, to withdraw from relationships, to blame others, or over or underreact to situations. It's important to remember that many of these behaviors we've listed are not necessarily bad behaviors, but engaging in them too much or too often does make them unhealthy. Now that we've recognized our stressors and understand how they affect us, we can move on to step number 2. Our second step is to change our reactions to stress. When we feel stressed, we often experience an overwhelming lack of control over our lives, as if there's nothing we can do to change our feelings of stress. But, however true that seems, we do have control over our responses to stressful situations, and by changing our responses, we can actually reduce our stress. One way to control our reactions to stress is to just breathe. There's a saying that you can't be stressed and relaxed at the same time. For example, if I take short, quick breaths, I feel like I'm going to hyperventilate and I feel tense. The opposite is also true. If I take deep, slow breaths, I feel more relaxed. What that means practically is that if we relax our bodies, we can relax our mind. For those of us who feel sweaty and like our heart is trying to jump out of our chest, focusing on how we're breathing can have a huge effect. As we slow our breathing, we slow our heart rate and tell our body that it's okay to relax. Try to take full breaths in the moment and let them out slowly. Here's a helpful breathing pattern. Try breathing in for a count of 4, hold the breath for a count of 4, and then exhale for a count of 6. The tricky part here is keeping that calm feeling. It is easy to get distracted and let our mind jump back to all the what ifs and pump our heart rate right back up. But it is important to focus on the present. Focus on your breathing, keep counting breaths in your head if you need to, and be aware of how tense your body is and focus on relaxing clenched muscles. Earlier I mentioned that a situation is only as stressful as we perceive it to be, and we know this because different people feel stressed by different situations. So, changing our perspective about a stressful situation could relieve a heavy burden of anxiety. First, asking for advice from someone we trust about the situation can give us different perspectives of what may have caused the situation or what may be the best thing to do. This gives us an opportunity to reframe the situation. For example, let's say a woman works in a busy office and her boss asks her to take on another long project at work. She grudgingly agrees and thinks to herself that she's being picked on, that she always gets the really time-consuming projects on top of all of her other responsibilities, and that it's just not fair. But what alternative could there be? What is another way to look at the situation? There really are a number of alternatives and other ways to see the situation, but here's a few. Perhaps her boss doesn't realize how time-consuming the projects are, or how difficult they are to complete with her workload. Perhaps her boss trusts her best with the kind of motivation and detail it takes for these particular projects. Or perhaps her boss is preparing her for an opportunity to advance at work by giving her more responsibility. All of these options are possible, and when we look at our stress in a new way, they can begin to seem less threatening, more bearable, and even more motivating. We can also practice more acceptance in our various environments and relationships. Acceptance in this context means understanding that things don't always go according to our plans, and sometimes cause frustration and pain, but not allowing us to soak in anger or sadness and keep thinking, what if? This could be accepting that not everyone will like us, that conflict happens in every relationship, that we will make mistakes, or that others will make mistakes that affect us. Our last tip to changing our reactions to stress is to stay positive. Our positivity is largely controlled by what we think about, and if our thoughts are negative, we're going to feel negative. First, avoid what ifs, worrying that something might go wrong or get worse, what that person may be thinking, or if you'll get that job or have enough money for the month. Oftentimes, when we think of what might go wrong, we exaggerate and turn a small mistake into a huge catastrophe. Someone applying for a job may hand out several copies of a resume and start worrying a few days later if he has not gotten any calls back. He could assume, no one called me back, no one wants to hire me, I'll never get a job. But he can't predict the future, and if we assume something bad is going to happen, then it just might. Instead, remember your successes, the times that you made the right choice, resolved the conflict, finished the project on time, got the job, whatever it might be. We often focus on our mistakes, but rarely do we take the time to remember when we got it right, times we can be proud of. Remembering the times when we got through something difficult reminds us that we do have the ability to do it again. I got through it once, and I can get through it now. Then, tell yourself calming, a supportive truth. Now, we don't want to lie to ourselves and say that everything will be even better than we can imagine, because that's not always true. Recognize the truth and remind yourself of your ability to survive and manage your stress. Our third step is to prepare ourselves to handle stress. Just as an athlete is going to exercise before a competition and a dancer will stretch before a performance, we too can train and stretch to give ourselves a better stance when we're faced with stress. We can do this by engaging in activities and habits that will prepare us to handle stress, that will help us store up energy so that our batteries are charged when stress comes. We also need to find ways to release tensions which keep stress from building up. And if we do these kinds of activities, we can become stress resistant, immune to new stressors, and ready to handle old ones. One way to prepare ourselves is to keep our bodies healthy. Most of us have been told that exercise is healthy for us, but did you know that it could relieve and help prevent stress? Take advantage of small amounts of time throughout the day. Exercise research tells us that getting our heart rate up for even 10-minute blocks throughout the day, for a total of 30 minutes, keeps us in good physical shape. We also need to fill our bodies with healthy foods. Whole, natural foods give us energy to get throughout the day and fight off illness. And along the same lines, we should also be aware of how much caffeine we're drinking and eating. Having a quad-shot latte or a caffeinated soda and feeling unable to relax is not very surprising. Sleep can significantly affect a variety of areas in our lives, including our energy levels, our physical health, and our moods, which in turn affect our productivity and relationships with others. Research recommends that we get 6 to 9 hours of sleep, depending on the person. If we get more or less, we may not be well prepared to handle stress. Finally, it's important to be aware that we may be experiencing some symptoms, like stress, that may stem from a medical illness. If you haven't seen your doctor in a while and are experiencing some physical symptoms, such as fatigue or headaches, it's a good idea to have a checkup and rule out a medical cause. Over time, stress can build up. One of the best ways to prevent that buildup and keep ourselves energized is to let our emotions out regularly in constructive, positive ways. Talking with a friend about what's irritating us and causing us to feel anxious is one of the best ways to do this. It relieves some tension and anxiety for us just by letting out our frustrations, and it makes us feel heard and supported, especially if our stressful situation hasn't made us feel that way. You could also try expressing your emotions through writing in a journal or diary, or writing a letter. Writing down our thoughts can often help us make sense of our frustration and recognize our stressors. Now, how often is regularly? This could be different for everyone, just as the person you share your frustrations with could be different. Try to share your frustrations with someone about once per week. This keeps you from reaching your boiling point. And here's a helpful tip. After you share, be sure to ask your friend, partner, spouse, whoever you talked with, about their stress. Good friends share together, not unload all their worries without sharing the other's burden. We also need to let our bodies relax. And this is difficult for some of us, especially in demanding jobs and busy home environments. We are focused on trying to be as productive as possible that we forget to let ourselves rest. One motivational author wrote, "One of the most telling features of a dominant performer is the routine use of recovery periods." So, we need to set aside time for ourselves to relax. Finding even 10 minutes at home to sit down and let your eyes and muscles relax can relieve a lot of tension from your body. If you're employed, your job may offer you 10-minute breaks for every several hours that you work. Take advantage of this time. It's vital that we keep relaxing places relaxing. One of the most common examples of this is refraining from doing work in your bedroom, like the many college students who write papers on their laptop while sitting in bed. This habit makes the bedroom a contradictory space, where your body doesn't know whether to be active and attentive or relaxed and sleeping. Do your best to protect your relaxing places from becoming workplaces. And what better way to relax and relieve tension than through laughter? Laughter is healthy for us and can energize us. So have fun with friends and family. Watch a comedy, play with puppies and kittens at the animal shelter, anything that makes you smile. The last thing we can do to manage our stress is to avoid unnecessary stress. Unfortunately, we are the culprits of our own misfortunes when our habits cause our stress. These habits are usually things we don't notice that we're doing, or that we don't want to admit are the causes of our stress. This could be lack of organization, a habit of being late, or agreeing to do too many things. Environments can also cause stress for us. These could be demanding workloads, or toxic relationships, or a work environment with dangerous or strenuous tasks. So, how do we avoid unnecessary stress? One way to avoid unnecessary stress is to be realistic. Too often, the goals we make for ourselves and others set us up for failure. They're difficult to meet or require extra attention and exertion that exhausts and frustrate us. Instead of becoming stressed, we can make our life easier by keeping a more realistic attitude. Take another look at the goals you set for yourself and others. Are they attainable? Are they unnecessarily high? We should also be sure to make appropriate expectations for ourselves and others. Do we expect others to be perfect? Do we feel completely let down when someone makes a mistake? Instead, we can remember that everyone makes mistakes now and again, and if we keep this realistic expectation, we avoid the stress of major conflict. Oftentimes, like this picture here, we assume that life is going to be this straight line without any hitches in the road. But the reality is, life looks a little bit messier, and we have these twists and turns. So this also helps us remember to keep a forgiving attitude, remembering that we all make mistakes and we all need forgiveness. So far we've talked about a lot of tools we can use to help manage our stress, but the reality is that none of these tools will help if we don't practice good organization. Feeling stressed about something we aren't prepared for is natural and logical, but sometimes it seems impossible to get things organized. Disorganization keeps us from relaxing. It's difficult to relax when we have clutter around the house and can't find simple items we're looking for. It also makes simple tasks like paying bills more difficult when we can't find the necessary documents, objects, or tools that we need. To avoid all the stress disorganization creates for us, we need to make time to organize. If we don't set aside small blocks of time to do this, it probably won't happen. We need to be intentional and give ourselves even 15 minutes per day or an hour every week to organize our house, our workspace, and any other place we spend significant time. We can also set aside time to clear out clutter that has accumulated in our house and may be hiding all those important documents we can't find. This means we may need to let go of a few things. Most of us can find things we've used once and forgotten about that is simply taking up space and making it difficult to find things we use often. By setting aside time to fill a giveaway box, we can simplify our spaces and our lives. Ultimately, if we make organization a habit, it would no longer be overwhelming to clean the house and organize our spaces, and really will take just a few short minutes. All of this builds a low-stress environment that we can relax in and helps us to find things we're looking for at the last moment without digging through piles of stuff. Every now and then we all run a little late, but for some of us it's difficult to be anywhere on time. Untimeliness can make us late for important events such as work and medical appointments. It can cost us money if we don't do things on time, such as paying bills, and overall steals control of our day and what we're able to accomplish. We can avoid stress by planning ahead. One tool we can use is an agenda, or a calendar, or some other planning tool. The best way to use an agenda is to write everything down we need to do each day. Review our list every morning and check off each item as we complete it. With an agenda, we don't have to rely on our memories to remember every chore, every call, appointment, and assignment. Instead, we can write down tasks as they come up and focus on each day one at a time. This reduces stress by keeping us from scheduling conflicting appointments, from having to reschedule appointments we miss when we rely on our memories, and by leaving us time to relax. One way to do this is to arrive 5 minutes early to work and to fun events and other appointments. You know that sinking feeling when you realize you'll be late to work or an appointment? We can avoid that feeling and negative consequences if we plan to be early. This way, when we are running a few minutes later than usual, we will still arrive on time because we adjusted our schedule to being early. And some of us need to learn to say no to invitations or responsibility. At work, there are times when a boss will ask if we have time to complete an extra project. Be honest with yourself and don't say yes just to please your boss. Respectfully explain the situation and say no when you do not have the time. And if possible, offer a suggestion. Perhaps you can work on part of it. If a friend invites you to an event but you have other obligations, explain and say no. If a relative asks you to lend money but lending it would leave you little room to take care of emergencies, say no. The more in control we feel, the less stressful a situation appears, and planning ahead keeps us in more control. Much of the time, we can manage our stress by changing how we react to the stressful situation, using all the tools we've just talked about, but sometimes that's not enough. In these situations, we need to avoid stress by making a change in the environment. There may be times when we need to share our thoughts and feelings with someone directly involved in a stressful situation, such as a supervisor at work, a family member we're in conflict with, or a family member we share financial responsibility with. Of course, we should do so respectfully and without blaming the other person. Simply share how the situation has been building up stress in your life and has made it difficult to manage. Now, sharing this is risky. It means being vulnerable. But it could start a meaningful conversation that leads to changes in the situation and ultimately take stress off of you. If the environment cannot be changed, you may want to consider leaving the environment. Working a job that causes you constant stress is not worth the long-term effects on your body, mind, and emotions. You are worth a healthy environment. Remember, this should not be your first reaction to any kind of stress. We all have to deal with stress. But we do not have to trap ourselves in environments of constant, unmanageable stress. We've covered a lot today. We've talked about the sources of our stress, how to change our reactions to stress, how to prepare ourselves to handle stress, and how to avoid unnecessary stress. If we follow these steps, we can train ourselves to react to stressful situations in healthier and more effective ways that decrease our stress and can actually prevent stress from overwhelming our lives. That concludes our workshop on stress management. Thank you for listening, and feel free to visit hopesource.us for other workshops we offer. Thanks.